What is up, guys, and welcome back to another chill street photography POV. Today's street photography session is very special as it takes place on the gorgeous streets of Buenos Aires. The footage that you're seeing now is a little sneak peek footage of how the city looks closer to golden hour. But before we get to this part, let's jump back to the very beginning of my journey here in Palermo. I started this journey looking for C41 Photo, which is a place where I had intended to get these photos developed. They did a great job and I loved how the photos came out, so thank you C41 Photo. I was also shooting with a color film for the first bit of this video. It's Fuji Superia 200, and I have edited quite a few of the shots in this video to increase color or contrast, so don't expect your photos to come out of the roll just like this. So walking down the streets of Palermo, there's a lot of evidence of artisans and other artists, and the streets are more or less completely decorated by one form of art or another. There's also these beautiful street trees that cover pretty much the entire neighborhood in shade, so even though it's about 33 degrees at the time that I'm filming this video, it feels pretty nice in the shade. This photo, I know it's been taken a million times, but I still took it. I think maybe I like leading into the cliche at this point. Every time I saw one of these gorgeous buildings for the first half of the walk, I pulled out my GoPro and took a little pan over footage of it, only to realize that later on, as I got closer to the center of the city, these buildings would absolutely multiply and intensify to the point where I was completely surrounded by them, and it boggled my little mind. Let me tell you, I was absolutely aghast at how gorgeous some of the buildings in this city are. We're coming up to the end of the Fuji Superia 200 roll. I had taken the majority of the roll earlier on in my trip, and that wasn't really the focus of what I was shooting during this session. I really wanted to shoot an entire roll of Rollei Infrared, specifically because it was a really high contrast black and white film, and one of my favorite street photographers, Horatio Coppola, shot entirely in black and white, and he also shot almost all of his street photography in Buenos Aires. So I thought it would be really cool to retrace his steps a little bit and try to visit some of the places that he captured back in the 1930s. The area you're seeing right now is a garment and textile district, and it seemed like every single store was selling specifically fabric. If you were the kind of person who made clothes, this area would be incredible. I did a double exposure to try and capture that layered feel that this area had, and also the first of many sort of leading line style street shots. This area seemed a little bit less touristy. I didn't really see a whole lot of people with GoPros, and so I was trying to be really discreet with my camera as I was taking it out, but managed to get a fair bit of footage nonetheless. That's one thing about taking photos in Buenos Aires, is you do have to be very discreet with your camera, and seeing as how I was both filming and photographing, the discretion had to be multiplied. So I came up with a few strategies for filming very discreetly, and clearly they were effective because I lasted the entire trip without getting anything stolen. So this area is where I kind of started to realize how incredible the rest of my street photography walk would be, because up until this point in my trip, I had really only visited Palermo, and all the buildings there are sort of small and like closer to the kind of buildings that I see in Vancouver, I guess. And the buildings here are definitely unlike anything I've seen anywhere in the world that I've been. Maybe closest in kind to the buildings in London, but extremely different in a way that I can't quite place. There's just this quality that is very specifically Buenos Aires to them. And I understand that a lot of it is colonial era architecture, but seeing the way that that architecture has been reappropriated by the people who live in this city over the years and years that it's been inhabited was very fascinating. And having an opportunity to walk around and capture it in the most natural way possible, you know, I'm not following any particular route, I'm just walking where the city takes me, it was extremely cool. So we're entering what I would call the monument part of town. There's a lot of these massive monumental colonial buildings. There's like a theater and there's a bunch of government buildings, and I did laps around this area for quite some time, just kind of capturing everything from every angle possible with my eyes, not with my camera. I didn't actually have my digital camera on me at all for this street photography walk, so that meant that the photos that you're seeing are the only photos that I took in like the 6 or 7 hours that I was out. And isn't that just the beauty of film? You're out for 7 hours and you take 36 photos. But no, that said, I absolutely adore some of the photos that I got. And this part of the video now that we're getting into, I think is really where the best of the roll shots start to come out, because, oh my God, we're getting into golden hour. It's like maybe 5 p.m. and the sun sets around 8. So the sun's low in the sky and it's casting these long golden rays down these crazy, crazy narrow streets. And just the detail was phenomenal. And the way that the shadows and the light interact with this infrared film was also super incredible. So the area that you're seeing now is what I was kind of referring to as Times Square. Like, it's got that Times Square vibe where there's just people and vendors and things everywhere. And at the center of it all is this monument, which is called the Obelisk. And it's this 1930s fascist piece of architecture that really just commands attention and pulls everything in the entire city towards it visually a little bit. So you've got these long leading lines, and at the end of it, just obelisk. Yeah, it's very striking and definitely was hard to tear myself away from it. This area is all jewelry. Every single store is jewelry. And I noticed that about some areas of Buenos Aires, there's just blocks and blocks and blocks of one specific kind of store. The fabric area was one and the jewelry store is another. And there was also an acrylic stands and acrylic signs area that I found that isn't recorded in this video, but that was also very strange. This area, at this point, I am just completely mind blown by the buildings that I'm seeing in the architecture. And again, just that lived in quality, like how people use the space and move through the space, and how people have done that for, you know, decades and centuries is very, very interesting to me, and definitely something that I strive to capture as a street photographer. Coming up now on what I think is the best of the roll, and I think it's the best of the roll because of this man on the bike who is staring directly at me. Here's a cropped version. I think that's a great shot. I don't know. I did not know that he was staring right at me when I took it. Also, this double exposure of some air conditionings mounted to the sides of buildings. That was kind of cool. Could have done more with that. I don't know. Turned out kind of neat. And yeah, so I decided to just keep walking past the obelisk. Didn't really know where I was going. And there was a few things that caught my eye. So there was this building and this building. I walked towards them. And there was this giant plaza with these beautiful trees and beautiful sun and beautiful grass, and it was absolutely baking hot. So even though this is very beautiful footage, keep in mind it's like 33 degrees out. But it turns out this is the Parliament building for Argentina, which looks like a Parliament building. I don't know, I've seen a lot of Parliament buildings, and yeah, it checks out. It's a colonial European style Parliament building for sure. I was only shooting with a 50mm lens, so I couldn't actually get like a wide shot of the Parliament building. I did get a shot of it with my GoPro. I got a few GoPro shots. I debated whether or not I was going to include them in this video, but I thought it would be more fun if this just had the film photographs, because Buenos Aires on film has a much better ring to it than Buenos Aires on GoPro. And we're coming up again to maybe my second favorite of the roll, which is this shot. And ooh, when I saw this shot, man, I was like, okay, I might be a good photographer. Maybe I'm a good photographer. Am I the best photographer? Am I a great photographer? Maybe. Here is the scan that I actually got back from the lab. So editing genius? Maybe. I don't know. Dodge and burn. Anyways, we're coming up to sort of the end of my time photographing this part of the city. I was getting extremely tired. I had been walking since like 1:30 and it was now closer to 6:30 or 7, so I was like pretty ready to go home. I was like, okay, this sun needs to go down pretty quick so that I can go home because I was not leaving while the sun was this gorgeous. I was not missing this opportunity. But yeah, finally the sun, as you can see in this footage, is no longer hitting the street, so I could no longer get those really beautiful sunbeams, and I decided to take this one last photo of this really, really cool building. So that was my last photo of the day. But I still had a good chunk of the roll to go. So the next shots that you're seeing are the photos that I took trying to use up the last of the roll. Yeah, that is all the photos and all the footage that I have for you today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you found this video interesting, this little glimpse into another part of the world. I absolutely enjoyed my time here. Like, it's been a phenomenal trip. So yeah, thank you guys again for watching. I will see you next week with a new video. And in the meantime, I want you guys to stay sharp and don't forget to keep shooting. Bye guys.